who have had encounters with demons or other paranormal beings. What are your stories? Time to get to the paranormal stuff, guys. We took some time to look at creepy camping and unclassified documents, but it's time to get back to the truly terrifying unknown. My name is Em, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Story 1. I've shared this story before, but it's left such a big impact on my life and has made me question what reality is. I lived with and took care of my dad when he was terminally ill with esophagus cancer. He fought bravely for 4 years. We had both been through a traumatic experience of losing my mom, his wife of 30 plus years, very suddenly to pancreatic cancer. He didn't know how to live without her, neither did I. But we got through it somehow. So when he said he was going to fight the cancer with chemo, radiation, and then a very extensive surgery, I was so happy. But I know he really wanted to be reunited with my mom. But after 4 years of fighting it, his journey was coming to an end. He had been in hospice and his time was running out. I was exhausted from being his main caregiver. The last weeks of life was me administering meds to him every 2 hours. So needless to say, I had been very low on sleep. I had such a relationship with my dad that a lot of times, I knew what he needed or wanted before he would even speak a word of it, almost telepathic in a way. I had just administered his meds and I went to lay back down in his bed because he was in a hospital bed now and we were in the same room. He had blackout curtains because he was a night owl his entire life, worked night shift also. So he still slept during the day and never got out of that habit. I must have been asleep for maybe 30 minutes or so, but something woke me up. I didn't open my eyes, I just listened to see if Dad was talking to me, and hoped I could go back to sleep until my alarm went off to give him his meds. What happened next only lasted seconds, but I can look back at the memory and see it in slow motion. So as I'm listening with my eyes and still closed, wondering what awoke in me, I get the brightest light shining in my face. It was warm and just blinding, as if the sun was right in front of me. The light dimmed and I saw 3 orbs, one in front, 2 in the back, like a triangle, each orb the size of a cantaloupe. And then I hear a voice say, "Thank you for taking such wonderful care of your father, but we will take over from here." The orbs traveled down to my feet and over to where my dad was in his bed. They circle his head and then enter my dad's head. I sat up instantly and looked around the room, wondering what the hell just happened. And then the orb said 6 days. He had 6 more days left on this earth in his body. I looked around the room to make sure none of the blackout curtains had lifted, to explain the light, checked the home to make sure no family members had stopped by or anyone else, and shone a flashlight in the room. But everything was how it was supposed to be. I had texted my friend and a few family members about this experience, and I told them that I was so either sleep deprived that I'm having hallucinations, or that this really happened, and that in 6 days Dad will pass. And that's exactly what happened. He passed away 6 days after this happened. I don't know why it happened to me. I don't consider myself religious, but I am spiritual. Part of me thinks that I needed to be reminded that we are souls having a human experience, and not the other way around. Because I went into such a dark place after losing my mom to cancer. I honestly can't say where I would be after losing my dad too. But that experience brought some sort of peace to me. It helped me come to terms with losing both of my parents to cancer at a relatively young age, and it reminded my soul that there is more than just this material world. First of all, OP, I am really sorry for your loss, and I just wanted to say that the care you gave for your father are probably some of the best memories you could have given to him before he passed. So thank you for being such a good child. I know it may not be much comfort, but I do want to believe that those orbs, or whatever the heck they really were trying to take him to whatever the other side holds, and that he would be at peace with them. Story 2. Alright, I've got one that I call my ghost or method story. When I was around 15 or 16, we started getting knocks on our door at around 10 p.m. at night, once or twice a week. Always around 10 to 11 p.m. Always 3 strong, curt knocks. We would also hear the sliding glass door to our sunroom open and slam closed. This went on for about 3 months. Every time I rushed out to the sunroom and catch whatever it was, I was met with a whole lot of nothing. I remember one night I was chilling in my room with my dog asleep on my leg. My room shared a wall with our sunroom. I hear the sliding glass door fly open. My dog hears it too and is instantly awake. I'm out the front door in less than 3 seconds. Nothing there. Sliding glass door half open. After that, the knocks became less frequent. Started happening only about once a month. One night I'm out with my martial arts friends and I get a call from my mom asking if that's me at the door. I say no and immediately rush home. Nothing again. The next night the knocks come again, and this time I'm standing right next to the door. I pull my knife out and am out of that door like a bat from out of hell. I see my gate swing open. I sprint out into my driveway. Again, nothing. I wander to the edge of my driveway and see my neighbor, a young ex-Marine who lives with his elderly mother, next door standing out there smoking a cigarette. He asks me if I'm looking for my dog. I feel a chill go down my spine. I tell him no, I'm looking for the thing that keeps knocking on my door. My mom had previously told him and his family about the strange knocks. This dude's demeanor instantly changes. He tells me to give him my knife and call the cops. I do, and he gets a flashlight and starts to look in the bushes across the street. It's a windy night. I call the cops and come back outside and ask him if he sees anything. He tells me he saw what looked like a large dog, running on all fours, bolt across the street into the bushes at inhuman speed. He said he thought it was my dog getting out, but said it looked bigger than he thought my dog was. Good-sized German Shepherd. When I told him it was the thing producing the knocking, he said it clicked, that something was wrong. As well, he said whatever it was smart, because he could hear it moving in the bushes, but it would only move when the wind blew to mask its movement. The cops show up and start looking around. They find a trampled path leading up the neighborhood just in front of my house. Starts to lead up a hill. My other neighbor from the first house on that hill walks down and asks the cops if they're looking for somebody. They say yes. He says there's someone on his roof. The look these cops give each other was comical. We're up at the house in 30 seconds. The cops, my neighbor, and my little 16-year-old butt. Cops climb up on the roof and can't find anybody. Cop says that the only way off that roof is a 20-foot jump over a spiked metal gate. We go around to check it out, and sure enough, a trampled pathway leading out into the forest trails on the hill. Whatever was on that roof had presumably made an Olympic-level leap off of the roof and over a Gothic-style spiked metal fence to escape. The next day we go to observe the trail this thing left in daylight. We find right across the street from my driveway, I crap you not, a trampled down nest in the foliage that had the month-old remain of various small creatures. The knock stopped after that, but it's always my favorite ghost story to tell. Had a lot of other strange things happen in my neighborhood. Just a weird place. I stopped being receptive to them once I hit my 20s, but still wonder if there's still weird stuff going on. I just don't notice anymore. Was it a ghost or monster? Just some meth head out transient with a penchant for the long jump and running on all fours, like a frickin' monkey person? Just a straight-up eldritch horror? My mom ended up calling the city every few weeks for months and demanding they trim the foliage across her street from us until they finally did. And then we bought 3 guns. Story 3. One time, me and my friend were in our car late at night after a Whataburger run. It was about 3 a.m. and we were chilling, eating in the car and joking around. Don't ask why we were up so late. It was sophomore year of college and we were pulling an all-nighter for Lord knows why. But anyways, we pull into our apartment complex and park perpendicular to the forest surrounding a majority of our complex. As soon as I put my car in park, I felt everything go cold, and I promise you I felt something in the air. I keep seeing this thing move in the forest out of the corner of my eye, but I think it's just the wind and branches. Finally, I'm like, WTF is that thing? And so I look closer, and it's 2 huge yellow eyes staring directly into my eyes. How is it that when I finally look harder, we make direct eye contact? This thing was staring at my eyes for a long time. I just knew it. So I'm like, oh crap, there's a man in the forest to my friend. And we both think it's a police officer at first. I don't know why we thought that, but once it showed itself, we knew it was no police officer. But then as soon as I made eye contact with it, this thing started walking out very quickly, coming straight for my car. Keep in mind my car was on, and so my lights were on, so this thing knew that I would see it coming. It just stepped out and its arms and legs were way too long. It looked like a creature trying to be human, but just wasn't quite pulling it off. The proportions and speed of the movements were just all too wrong and off. I fully believe this wasn't a human, with its huge and hollow yellow eyes. It never broke eye contact with me. Ever. I drove a small Volkswagen Bug at the time, which I know is a small car, but this creature was towering above my car. It was literally the boogeyman. The closer I looked at it, the more scary it got. The more scared I got, the bigger it grew. Its face was covered by what it looked like, and I'm not kidding, a mask of a human face. But the thing's eyes were definitely its own. Finally, I snapped out of my terror and reversed out of my spot so fast. By that time, he had made it all the way to the front of my car and was touching the hood. I wish I had run it over, honestly. But when I looked back in my rearview mirror to see what was going on, it was standing in the spot I had just been parked in, waving, and staring straight into my eyes through the mirror. Don't know what this was. I've heard lots of things. I think it was a demon for sure, but that's just me. It's funny a little how OP was like a deer in the headlights when they were the one driving the car. Irony aside, how OP described the creature sounds absolutely terrifying and like legitimate nightmare fuel. Story 4. In November 1988, I woke up in the middle of the night because I felt myself being dragged out of bed by my feet and calves. There is a sensation of electromagnetic energy, like static electricity. and when you try to put two positive or negative sides of a magnet together around my legs. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was halfway down my bed, and the lower part of my legs had to be hanging off, but something was holding them up. I was unable to move, but could see the room clearly because I always kept a blue light on, so I could see, because weird things had been happening for months and I was afraid to sleep or be in the dark. Suddenly, an area of my room near my closet blurred or rippled, like heat waves, and then something was standing there. It appeared to be about 5 feet tall, large round head, large round black eyes, earth-colored and very slender. No clothes. Abruptly, it rushed at me in kind of a blur, moving at a speed that is impossible. It stopped directly in front of me and we locked eyes. As all this was happening, I didn't really feel afraid because I kept telling myself it couldn't possibly be happening, that I must be in between a waking and dreaming state, despite the fact that I was wide awake and fully conscious. This next part has confused me to no end. As this being and I made eye contact, I felt and could see shock and fear go through him. I had the sense he was male. Like, I wasn't supposed to be awake. He quickly ducked down out of my field of vision, bending his torso in a way that human beings can't, then slowly stood back up and stared at me again. He was clearly afraid of me, which made no goddamn sense as I couldn't even move. I also felt an enormous amount of affection and familiarity from him, like we knew each other well and he cared for me deeply. Then everything went black and I remember nothing more until I woke in bed the following morning. Story 5. I had a couple of weird experiences. The first was when I was in Gettysburg and doing a night tour of the battlefield. I was with a group of friends and walking down the trail when I saw what I think is one of the many reenactors dressed as a soldier and sitting on a horse a few hundred yards away. I thought it was odd that he was all by himself at night. As we kept walking, he didn't get any closer, but at the same time, he seemed to get a bit fuzzier. At this point, I asked a few of the friends I was with what they see, and they all said the same thing: a reenactor on a horse. But kind of fuzzy, like there's a fog there even though there isn't. Then he just faded away, horse and all. The second was in my room at my parents' house. My room was in the basement and it was separated from the stairs by one of those hinge folding screens. One night I woke up, but wasn't sure why. There was some light filtering down the stairs, so it wasn't pitch black, and I felt, but didn't see or hear something coming down the stairs. Half the staircase is blocked by a wall. After that, the wall opened up, and it was just a railing the rest of the way down. Right at that point is also where the screen touched the stairs. There were a couple of square-foot gaps. When I got to that point, it blocked out the light and I could see the silhouette of a woman. She turned right at the bottom of the stairs, which led her behind the screen into the opening to my room. As she passed each of the gaps between the screen panels, she again blocked out the light. This seemed to take forever to happen, and I was terrified and just sitting there frozen in bed. There were 4 panels, and after she passed the gap between the last 2, nothing else happened. She never appeared at the actual opening. She was just gone. I actually grew up around Gettysburg. And one thing you kind of just knew after living there for a while was not to go at night. Regardless of if you believe in the paranormal or not, it's a crap ton of open field. And it's not always the safest. It also had thousands of people die on the land. So if you are a believer in ghosts, it's one of the creepiest places you can go to look for ghosts. Story 6. I got 2 stories to tell, which are not that exciting, but well, I'd still love to share them. 1. My grandpa passed away when I was 9, which is 10 years ago. And a few months after his death, I was home alone as my parents had an appointment somewhere. My siblings were at their friends. I was sitting in the living room at like 9 p.m. watching TV and waiting for my family to come home. Suddenly, I saw someone in the corner of my eyes. Then I looked at it, and it was my grandpa sitting in his spot on the couch. He was smiling at me and winked. He always wanted to show me he's happy. It was some kind of secret sign between us. And in that next second, he was gone. I wasn't freaked out at all. I was just happy to know he's happy wherever he is. Although I'm 100% sure I saw his ghost sitting right next to me, too. My grandma, wife of said grandpa, died recently. My dad and I visit her house nearly every day to make sure there won't be any vandalism, and to already take some of her belongings to our house so that nothing gets stolen. She loved to collect almost everything she found interesting, so her house is pretty much full of stuff. When she was still alive and I visited her, she would always walk to the pantry to get me some of my favorite juice and come back to the living room, where we used to sit and chat for hours and hours. As she is my favorite person ever, and always will be, and we love spending time with each other. Like, we had this special connection some humans have between each other. So my dad and I were in her house, and I don't know why exactly. It was some sort of gut feeling, I think. I turned around. I saw a blurry grandma-shaped figure walking towards the pantry, as if my grandma herself, even as a ghost, still wants to get some juice for me. Story 7. Well, I can't say for certain that when I encountered was a demon in the strictest sense of the word. I am more than comfortable describing this thing as at least demonic or malevolent in nature. At that time, I was in a dark headspace, exploring the darker realms of magic, trying to ascertain truth versus fiction, to discover as much as I could of what was in fact real, and what was purely fiction. To get to the gritty point, one day I was walking home in the rain, can't get any more dramatic than that, and happened upon a small prayer of exorcism printed upon a pocket-sized square. I thought that was odd. Curious, I decided to pocket it. When I got home, I ventured into the room wherein I had spent most of the aforementioned Saturdays. I sat before my desk and just kind of stared off into the space. When I swear for the quickest few seconds, I saw out of the corner of my left eye a gigantic black mass charging at me from the adjacent room through the doorway. Before I could fully spin around to face it, to verify if there was indeed someone coming at me or I was just hallucinating, I felt the slap of 1,000 suns across my face. So hard was it that the headphone I had just put on moments before went flying off across the room towards a facing bookcase. I leapt from my chair and started yelling, flailing, thinking there's an intruder in the room with me. There was nothing. At that moment, I felt extremely cold and suddenly very, very frightened. Ran upstairs, looked in the mirror. Huge red mark across my face. There were other incidents, but that's the only time I can say I actually saw it. However brief the visual encounter. I think this is the scariest thing to me, is just not being able to see whatever is after you. It's the fear of the unknown and the reality that you ultimately can't do much to stop it if you can't see it. But maybe this should be a lesson to let some things go undisturbed. Story 8. When I was a young one, around 10, I had an uncle who died. I was sad because death was a really weird concept for me. After a few days, I saw this weird shade in the corner of my room at night. I could make out the eyes, but nothing else except its shape, which was human, this thing. Probably my dead uncle waiting in limbo. Didn't feel bad or scary, and I don't think it was sleep paralysis, because I felt something when my back was against the room in my bed. So I had to turn around. I wasn't scared when I saw it. This was the first time I saw him. A few days later, the same thing happened, except the shape was really close to my bed. I had a bunk bed at that time, so I saw 2 hands in the face just above my bunk bed in front of my face. Again, I wasn't scared, because this thing didn't feel bad. Till this day, I'm 100% sure I saw the ghost of my uncle. I'm 24 now. Another story. This time I was around 14. I moved with my mother and her boyfriend to another house. It was this huge old villa, and at night I was too scared to go to the bathroom because I felt bad things in this house. I never saw something here, but the feeling I felt was 180 degrees different than what I felt when I saw my uncle. This bad feeling was at its worst when I was near the cellar or attic. Luckily, I moved out of that house. Hope this story is interesting to you guys. Story 9. I was about 14 years old and lived with my grandparents since I was a baby, but moved to a different room in the house just because I wanted to change. I always have white Christmas tree lights all over the headboard on my bed and sleep with them on. One night the batteries died before I went to sleep, but I didn't mind because I didn't need them to sleep. Then I woke up not being able to breathe. I could move my head and feet, but my arms and legs felt as if they were being held down and something was sitting on my chest. I saw a dark figure floating at the end of my bed, looking at me as this was happening. And since my grandmother was very religious and believed in spirit stuff, I'd learned to just stay as calm as possible. I closed my eyes and tried harder to breathe, and when I opened my eyes, the figure was still there, but was closer than before. Then my eyes went wide because I was getting more scared. All of a sudden, the figure took a step back and a dark shadow like wings appeared. Then it disappeared out my bedroom window. After that night, I asked my grandma to move back to my old room, and the rest of the few nights I was in that room, I made sure my lights were charged and I never saw the figure again. It's a good thing you were able to stay at least somewhat calm, OP, especially considering you dislike the dark to begin with. That being said, if this happens again, there is a chance you're experiencing sleep paralysis compared to seeing actual entities. Either way, though, I'm sure what you were seeing was absolutely terrifying. Story 10. When I was young, I went to the bathroom at night downstairs. Then I saw a weird, dark, cloudy whirlpool from the floor of the living room, and a dark, condensed cloud thing came out of it. It had some red, glowing light from where I expect the eyes to be that came from within the dark, condensed cloud. It floated across, stopped, looked at me, and turned away. I was frozen solid in place, and the moment it turned away, I bolted up the stairs. Once I was up, I was shocked and confused. I kept pinching myself to reassure myself that it was not a dream. I kept trying to go down and look for the figure, but never saw it again. Then I complained to my parents, but they just told me to sleep. I did, as I was absolutely terrified. I woke up and inspected the living room, but the layout was slightly different. But the whole sequence of events was logical, with no gaps, and the pain when I pinched myself was real. So it was either real, as only the layout of where it emerged was different. Everything else was accurate. Or I just had an extremely realistic dream and my memory went awry. Story 11. I'm connected to Sasquatch somehow. I've had dreams of them my whole life, and in my dreams, we were always friends. We communicate telepathically with them. I got to see one when I was a teen on my reservation here in Oregon. It was a young one, I'm assuming, since it was only about 5 feet tall, and it was all orange in color. It looked right at me, then ran up to the very steep mountainside. Years later, when I lost my older brother, I was in Albuquerque. I kept having bad dreams, and on the 4th night, the dream was of my mom's house in Oregon. And there were around 7 huge 11 to 12 feet tall Sasquatch holding hands in a circle around my mom's home. When I called home the next morning, I was informed my oldest brother was missing. He was found 3 days later and had fallen off the Oregon coast while hiking. My family in Oregon are still shocked to this day how I knew something was wrong. Sasquatch told me. I swear this is all true. This was one of the strangest stories I think we've read so far. I've heard plenty of stories about Sasquatch sightings, but never someone who felt they were mentally linked to the Sasquatch themselves. It is strange that you knew where your brother was, OP, but even stranger that you believe it was because the Sasquatch told you. I'm almost imagining like the Yeti from Monsters, Inc. just making a little snow cone the whole time talking to OP in their mind. Story 12. In my old house, I had a lot of encounters with something. Usually, just the feeling of being watched and swearing I saw something moving. On the night this happened, I had already called my stepmom into my room to sleep with me because I felt watched. I was 13 and 14 at the time, so it wasn't just me being young and scared of some made-up monster. She left the room to go let the dog out. I had the TV on and was in bed. I then saw some weird little black orb. It passed in front of the TV, and then the frickin' cable box turned off. I have never screamed louder. My mom died in the room over back in 2015. It was maybe 10 feet through a wall away from where she died. Everyone likes to either tell me it was a hallucination or it was my mom, oh so lovingly visiting me. I feel like she'd have the sense to stop when I cried on multiple occasions because of how scared I was. Story 13. Years ago, I did a ghost hunting tour with my ex-husband at the famously haunted hotel, the Elms in Excelsior Springs. I thought it was fun and quirky, but didn't take it too seriously. My ex for sure doesn't believe in ghosts and mostly hung out in the lobby. So the tour ends and we go to our room to go to bed. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to my ex sitting straight up in bed staring at the wall. I ask if he's okay, and he says repeatedly, "Can you hear her? Can you hear her singing?" I keep saying, "I don't hear anything. What are you hearing?" He then looks at me wide-eyed, lays back down and falls asleep. The next morning, he didn't remember anything. For all the years we were together, he never once again talked in his sleep or sleepwalked. Scared the crap out of me. Story 14. I once came home from a horse show, and our barn is a pretty good distance from our house. As I was going to unload my horse and head back out the gate, I hear clear as day a whistling. Not like a bird or anything. It was clearly a human whistle. There was no one around, just me and my horse. And it wasn't the radio either. Still to this day, I cannot explain it, and now every time I'm down there by myself or near our gate, I swear someone is watching me. Or at least it feels like it. Also, along the same fence line, I've had weird experiences. Me and my boyfriend at the time were repairing the fence, and we heard running footsteps and sound like a shotgun racking, getting ready to shoot. But once again, no one was around. Super strange. That is really weird, OP. I'd suggest maybe getting some security cameras and motion sensors, just to double check and make sure that there isn't somebody stalking you guys. Story 15. On a hunt, I encountered something in the woods. I thought it was a person in a blue coat. I approached and something didn't feel right. Despite that, I had a 7mm Magnum and was capable of dropping any animal in Washington. This thing made me back away slowly in fear. It darted in and out peeking, then moved 7 feet up and peeked. It was solid, then shimmered. I tripped over an old hobo camp. Rifle was ready. I backed away very scared. I made it to my buddy's truck, which was 200 feet away. I seriously walked backwards, keeping my eye on it. My buddy shows up. He's pale as a ghost. I didn't see anything. He said I didn't even ask, and he was scared to cry. We left without saying what we saw. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.